Hello, everybody, and welcome to another exciting, hair-raising, fun-filled, expeditious episode of Radiorama, where, as the name suggests and implies, I show you how to work on radios, but sometimes televisions, stereo systems, other stuff that happens to run on glowing vacuum tubes. And today we have an RCA Victor FM-only radio. What model is this? Model 1-F-1. And what do we have here? 1, 2, 3. Am I missing a tube here? That can't be right. 1, 2, 4, 5. Okay, it's a 5-tube set, but several of these have several sections. The 19T8 has 3 sections. 12DT8 has 2. So if you really think about the sections, if you were to break them all up, you'd have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. It's equivalent of like a 7-tube set. Now, I've never worked on this model before. I thought it was pretty fascinating. It looks like that you remove a screw here and these 2 screws. I'm guessing it's a clamshell design, so it should come apart. They started doing stuff like this in the 50s to prevent people from shocking themselves, because this thing is completely enclosed. Let's see what's on the dial here. Give me a little civil defense. Oh, never mind, this is FM. You wouldn't have civil defense on FM. I think it's probably from the mid-50s. That's my guesstimate anyway. Most definitely probably not using the Armstrong FM circuit, because if you look up the history of FM, it's pretty tumultuous. Edwin Howard Armstrong, true genius in my opinion, was kind of robbed of his patent by RCA and David Sarnoff. Sorry, I almost said Smirnoff. two different names, 2 different product. But anyway, let's try to take this apart and look underneath the hood. I don't suspect there's much to replace here. There's probably an electrolytic can and maybe a across-the-line paper cap or something like that. We'll see. Let's take it apart. So someone has been in here, but they've been in here in a good way, actually. Cause I miscounted the tube equivalent, because what I didn't see, or I failed to look at, was the fact that I didn't see a 35W4, or in other words, a rectifier tube. Well, it appears that I can't tell if this is factory or someone's been in here. I'm asking because I've got this terminal strip that is riveted to the chassis. It looks factory because they're rivets. They look the same as the other rivets. If you had a selenium rectifier, it'd usually be on the chassis. This could be a very early example of using a silicone diode instead of a selenium rectifier. That's good, because seleniums, if they blow up or they short out, then they stink like crazy. They're not. It's not pleasant to be around. I just recognize something very unpleasant about this design, and that unpleasantness is the fact that we've got the dial string is attached to the front of the plastic cabinet. In order for me to get to that electrolytic, I'm going to have to somehow pull this chassis out. Oh man, what an annoying design. I was thinking this was going to be an easy thing, but it's never that way. Why, oh why? They do it this way. Better yet, how are you supposed to wind it back on there? Well, if there's any way, is there any way that I can push this off or something? Just thinking aloud out here. What can I do? Can I pinch, like tape this together somehow? I'm going to take a lot of pictures, but what I have to do is somehow remove this. How did they manufacture this? All right, I'll think of something, but this is annoying. Alright, here's my Jared way of dealing with this. I pinched the cable around the pulley, and I took a lot of pictures. And all I have to do is just run that wiring back the way it was. This is, of course, where it goes around the shaft. And there's a separate volume control. There's a nut holding that underneath the volume knob. But the good news is that I got it apart successfully. And it looks like we have two electrolytic capacitors here. We have an 80 microfarad and a 50 microfarad. Huh. Rated at 175 volts. That's interesting. Usually it's 150. How could it be that high? Man, there's like nothing going on here. It's all ceramic caps except these two guys. What are these? 0.01, 200 volts? It's nothing. 400 volts on that one. Then we got electrolytic up top here. It's probably working as a bias. Yeah, off of the 19T8 tube. I was about to say that's the FM tube, but this whole thing is FM. So this is more importantly tied to FM. It's got its own special little module here. And I'm not an engineer, so I have no idea how to explain why you would shield the tube away from the rest of these guys. I'm assuming there's interference issues here. But there ain't much to do here. Two electrolytic capacitors. I'm going to look at my stock to make sure I got the right voltage. And or if I test it, I want to see what the actual operating voltage is. I think 160 would be just fine. Okay, well, one of the first things I noticed is that this is a true hot chassis set. You've got one end of the line going to chassis ground. That's not unusual for an FM set. But the good news is there's nothing that the user can really get at. I'm looking at this volume control here. I'm wondering if that's physically isolated as well. Even so, this is recessed into the plastic. So someone would have to intentionally tug the knob off and stick their finger down in the hole. The rest of it you can't get at, so I'm not concerned about it. But what I want to do is see what the actual operating voltages are on those electrolytics. 142, 96 volts. Okay, so that tells me that I can replace those electrolytics with these two guys. They're rated at 160 volts each. Probably RCA just got a deal on some capacitors and they happen to have a weird voltage rating for some reason. Again, we'll need to replace these two as well and that electrolytic up top. And then we'll clean the volume control and clean the tuning condenser, even though it looks pretty clean. And since we were able to take the clamshell completely apart, I'm going to clean it. It's not a great color, but it's not a boring color. And it's pretty stylish. And I've also noticed that you can clip the plastic out. And that way I can polish and clean this plastic as well. It's actually in pretty good shape. But what I'll need to do is replace these two individual electrolytics. It looks like this one is the 80 microfarad side, the square. It's got the mark stamped and embossed in the electrolytic phenolic material for the base. And then we've got a bunch of stuff going to this lead. Looks like we have three resistors and probably one end of the, oh, that's going to the output tube. That makes sense. The other one probably goes to the output stage. Yep, you got the output transformers lead coming up out of here. It's interesting. I think this might be a little earlier than I thought. This is by then you would have thought they would be well into the PCB board era in the mid-50s. So maybe this is a little earlier. I don't know. I'll look up the model number and I'll confirm later. All right, well, that wasn't that difficult. We've got the two electrolytics replaced, and what you want to make sure and do, try to keep your power resistors away from them because you'll just bake them and they'll fail prematurely. You just want a little bit of air. We got one more paper cap to replace and then electrolytic on the top. And then we'll test it out to make sure we're still working, which, I mean, it should. We've replaced like 3 parts. All right, so let's fire it up and see what happens. Let's talk to the video camera. I'm testing a radio to make sure it works. By the way, everybody, that's my wife in the background, if you're curious. All right. I don't hear anything. Then again, I wonder... Oh, there we go. It's hard for me to tune this. It's so freaking sensitive. Plus my loop antenna is all messed up here. It probably does not like that. See if I can make it look like a loop somewhat. Alright, let me try that. Plus I'm touching the metal. It doesn't like that either. I think I've got some dirty pin contacts going on here. Okay, what the situation is that the turn ratio on this is crazy different than the AM radios I typically work on. I don't usually work on FM only sets. There's usually AM and FM combined. But basically, if you breathe on this, like you see how slowly that little pulley down there moves. So, I mean, I can tune things in, but if I breathe wrong, like it goes off tune. So I'm not going to be able to really sit here manually and try to tune in a station at all satisfactorily. Like it needs to be back in the case with the tuning string reconnected. I'm probably not helping that I've got my finger touching the metal either. Yep. Very interesting. I'm not used to that. I think what I'm going to do anyway is test the tubes just to make sure we're firing in all centers. I think we are. We've got it looks like all the original RCA tubes. Makes me wonder if this guy was used all that much. All right, well, I took the plastic cover off, and luckily the glue that was holding this very thin aluminum piece, it's like a sticker, popped right off, so I don't have to worry about getting that wet. So now both clamshells are just plastic and can be put over in the sink and cleaned up, including this guy. It's like no paper or anything, and that'll dry out. Like I'll just squirt some WD-40 in those contacts to make sure what displaces to water. That's what WD-40 stands for. It's water displacement. I think attempt number 40, and then they got it right on the 40th try. Okay, welcome to day number 2 of working on the RCA FM only set. And what I'm going to do now is add the oh-so-famous audio input feature that I give to a lot of these little sets. And this is especially critical because this is a true hot chassis set. We need to make sure the user is isolated from any sort of shock hazards. So we're going to put this isolation transformer, which will be where one end of the audio comes in through this side, which is the secondary side of the transformer. And then the primary side goes to the volume control. And you can ground it anywhere. I'm going to ground it, in this case, to the chassis. And what we want to do is also make sure that the incoming audio, and well, basically not the audio, but the transformer is going to mess up the set's automatic gain control, because we found that these guys messed that up. So you put a resistor to just half the value of the volume pot. In this case, it's 270,000 ohms. Wattage can be minuscule. Then we put a 0.02 rated cap. Again, voltage is minuscule. And that'll go to the top end of the pot. And again, the other side is going to chassis ground. Usually I'd go to the other side of the pot. But since this is true hot chassis ground, then the isolation transformer is going to go to chassis ground. The challenge is going to be how to get the cabling to it. I know some people cringe when I say this, but I'm going to have to probably probably drill a few holes in the back where it won't be noticeable. I guess for that I'm going to have to fit the cabling here, so I'll try to cinch everything up, because what I want to do is connect my audio line and see if I can align it with the chassis, not the chassis, but the case back as good as possible. Because then I'll have to drill a hole and then run the cable in, tie a knot in the other end so you can't yank it out. And at first I'm going to see if it'll work without switching the IF off, but I get a feeling I'm going to have to add another switch, so we'll see what happens. I usually manufacture these before I put them in the case. I'll just measure the the wires to make sure they're the right length. You want to keep everything short. And then I've roughened up the steel here and the underside of this. I'm going to use some Gorilla Super Glue. For some reason I found that stuff works really well, and that'll attach this to that chassis. Make sure and clean it up real good first. Alright, well, it kind of comes through, but it sounds distorted. And I'm getting a little bit of radio coming through the signal. I think it's because FM is so much more sensitive. Got this massive antenna here. And then the switch wires are probably also acting like an antenna. I mean, I could probably still pick up stations. The other thing I remember is from yesterday. I don't know, but maybe I'm just imagining things. It seems like my B plus was a little low. I didn't think about it that much, but I've had bad luck with some of these earlier solid state diodes, especially RCA diodes. And because it's so quick, I'm just going to replace it. I've got shit tons of diodes sitting around, so it's just good insurance, and I'll measure the B plus after I replace it.
Say that you are wrong, that you misunderstood. Relax and take it easy. You know what I mean. Don't be nervous, don't get excited.
Could just be it's a really dinky speaker, I don't know. That's as good as I can get it to sound. Now, the last thing I'm going to do, just because a lot of people forget to do the most obvious of things, which is, okay, well, what if one of your tubes is either gassy or has a short in it? It's the easiest thing to do. It's the easiest thing to cancel out. And I cannot believe how many times I've been fooled by assuming, oh, it works, so the tubes must be fine. And it turns out, no, it's not. One of them's very sick. So it doesn't hurt to check. My 19T8 is not happy. Tests good, but it's very peculiar. It's like partially shorting to like really shorting. I've never seen any. What the heck? Alright. That's bizarre. I'm going to have to save that guy. I'll show that off to the guys on Saturday. Anyway, time to go get another tube.
Trying God, I don't need the pills you take just to feel the spirit moving. Brother, I ain't slept in days, all without the drugs you use. Set me forth to builders use.
That's it. That's what I needed right there, that tube. I'll go ahead and mark this with a Sharpie. I want to make sure I bring that in so I can show off how weird that thing shorts. But that was the problem. I bet FM will be a lot happier too. What the hell just happened? Alright, welcome back to day 2 of working on the silly RCA and its weird tube that shorted out spectacularly. But anyway, what I've done is I came in and wanted to kind of make sure that my connections for my cutting of the audio off were sane. And I rechecked, and this connection here had like over 90 volts on it. So I really don't want to be cutting 90 volts on and off of the set. Even though it killed FM and it worked with audio, not a good idea. So what I did is I cut the main lead, which has no voltage on it, going into the FM module. And I'm not an FM person. I'm not sure what this box up top is, but I'm assuming it's pretty much the most important part of the FM circuit. So I put a cut between that, and I put a switch here, and I tested it to see if it was going to make any nasty noises, because sometimes these wires twist together like that. The radio will basically have a semi-connection to at least play something. But it seems like it's pretty quiet. And so now it is time for putting it back in the cabinet. Before I finish, I guess because I'm paranoid about what if this ever came loose someday, I don't want it knocking around with these exposed terminals. So I usually put a little glue over the top of all that. So if it does, it's still isolated. Me and OCD. All right, let me get the other cabinet halves and we will start the reassembly process. All right, so it's time to do some reassembly. And generally what I do when it comes to weird cases like this, I just try to line everything up. So it's going to be easier, put everything back together in the clamshell case. And I rememorize what hardware goes where. So if I need to hold something tediously, I don't have to be looking around for the right hardware. So I'm going to get the chassis back in here. That's going to be probably the most difficult part. Actually, probably the most difficult part is going to be putting that string back on. Hopefully I don't mess it up. But I took lots of pictures, so hopefully I will figure it out. All right, so I've gotten to the point where I've gotten the chassis back in. To admit, it wasn't easy, actually. It's really tight in there. Last thing is to look at my pictures to see how this string goes and peel that tape off of there, and hopefully it'll tune the right way. Well, luckily that went off without a hitch. I was able to get it all situated again. So in the future I want to have something weird like that, I don't know. Before I put it all back together, I'm going to oil some of the bearings in here so it just feels nicer. I'm going to use a little... Where did it go? I cleaned up my shop the other day. Now I can't find anything. It's oh, here it is. Zoom spout oil. Just going to put just a tiny little bit on the bearing surfaces. I'd be a little cautious about this guy. Maybe you want to make sure you get it behind the bearing and not on top of it. There we go. That won't affect the bearing surface. Maybe just a little bit there. Oh yeah. Maybe just put a little tiny dab here on these little bearings here. Even more better. Now it's time to put the case back together, and then I'm going to start doing some touch-up plastic polishing, and then we'll give it a final test. But I think we're in good shape. All right, so now that we've got the basic clamshell back together, it's time to do some cosmetic work. Finish is actually in good shape. Well, the plastic is. There's no real abrasions in it. It's been taken really good care of, but I want to polish that up, and then I need to glue the decal back on. In fact, I should go ahead and do that now, because that thing might outgas as it's drying, and I want to go ahead and do it now.
Well, come on, everybody, let's get together tonight. I got some money in my jeans and I'm really gonna spend them right. Well, I'm gonna do my homework all the week long, and now the house is empty and my folks are gone.
All right, she lives. And if I want to listen to the radio, just flip a little switch in the back. And we got FM.
So they want you to join their team.
Yeah.
A minute away sometimes.
That's some leaving things at home. Like, whoa, a girl who thought...
All right, yay, happy FM, happy audio input. You get the best of both worlds in a pretty nifty looking case. It sounds better in the cabinet anyway. All right, guys, thanks so much for watching. Thanks for putting up with all of my crazy nonsensical nonsense. But we got through this one just like all the others. And so if you have any questions or comments, you can leave them down in the comment section below. I've not been doing a good job of getting to the comments lately. I'm sorry. I'll try in the future. Anyway, guys, thanks so much for watching. I'll see you guys next time. Adios.